This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Hansen. Thurley, Ruxton by Philip Verrill Mighels. Chapter 49. A Trysting Place. The telephone was not disturbed that night. A mere metal wire has frequently warmed and tingled at the voice of Cupid speeding down its length, but Thurley had plans that were all her own, as well as a number of things to say that took no account of instruments that rendered distance between the principals obligatory. Some time late that Friday night, Gotham weather changed. A warm wind drifting a tropical temperature from Tampa to the bleakness of New England wrapped all the world of Manhattan in its voluptuous embrace and melted the snow from its bosom. The morning broke with crystal clearness, the sun all gold in a turquoise sky, and the summery breeze now languidly puffing at eddying pools of melted snow till they withered and floated away. The only mar in all the perfect morning was supplied by the city newspapers. Their accounts of the end of the miserable Pelivan, almost unanimously pronounced a Black Hand agent whose plot had judiciously miscarried, served to reawaken fears already sufficiently sleepless. But youth is retentive of joys and hopes where alarms find but temporary lodgment. Thurley was young, and her heart was too full of her own excitement to permit large room for dreads. She passed the morning in a constant succession of fevers and doubts, concerned alone with Robley Stuyvesant. But leaning on Alice for assistance was enormously sustaining, for Alice certainly helped. It was she who telephoned at last to Stuyvesant when the psychological moment had arrived. That was at 2 in the afternoon. "Just called you up to relieve your mind and set a misconception straight," she told him cheerily. "That loan, you know, of 30,000 to a certain individual. It was the prettiest two-edged stroke I've seen for an age. Yes, it floored a certain count and paralyzed its recipient like 1,000,000 volts coming from a hairpin. No, I'll tell you all about it later. Why, I'm trying to inform you delicately. She did it because she wanted to squelch them both. Yes, I thought perhaps you'd like to know where to find her." "No, she isn't here." "I don't know exactly where she is myself. Now, listen intently. She said she was going over in the park to some wonderfully romantic spot where someone broke his wrist one day, but for what earthly reason is more than a mortal could guess. Now wait, don't hurry. Robley." But there was silence on the wire. Thurley, at a little past the hour of 2, was seated alone on that particular bench she had one day occupied when all the world, though clothed in the splendours of its autumn gold and crimson, was a grey and desolate perspective so far as she could discern its wide expanse. To-day the sun obliquely slanted on denuded trees and on grass down-beaten and sodden from the recent snow, as well as on roads that here, in the sections of the park unfavoured by the pomp and glory of wealth, were practically deserted. Yet gleams of the world's most refulgent light seemed beckoning on all her far horizon, and though she still had doubts and tremors interspersed with all her hopes, the prospect seemed a verdant field of flowers and rills and song. A plump grey squirrel, bright-eyed, cosy in his furs, and confident of friendship from the whole human tribe, came inquiringly up to halt at Thurley's feet and beg for alms to crack. He tucked first one, then the other of his tiny paws in the muff of his little breasts, gazing at her appealingly and flirting the banner of his tail. "Hullo," said Thurley, "if I'd only thought to bring a bag of peanuts." Her hungry little visitor leaped upon the bench, came fearlessly up to walk across her lap, poke his active little nose against the glove on her hand, then leaped again to the earth and weather-trampled sod, where he took up a search for hidden treasures. Thurley had turned to watch him when the faint distant purring of a motor car spun her about on the seat. Stuyvesant came round the bend, holding the wheel as best he might, with a wrist still unequal to the task. The colour leaped to Thurley's cheeks like rose leaves tossed upward in a zephyr. Then the car was halted, and Stuyvesant rose to leap out over his extra tires, as he had done on the first occasion. "Oh, don't try that!" cried Thurley, her old impulsive self immediately uppermost as she sprang to her feet and ran a little toward the car. "Please don't break anything more." He laughed despite the depth of emotions in his breast, alighting quite intact. She stood in the road to meet him, and gave him her hand as he came there, doffing his cap. "You know I don't like threes exactly," she added, "if it means 3 injuries or anything like that." "I wonder if you'll ever meet me here again," he answered, as they turned to go to her bench. "That's the sort of threes I hope for, the threes with nothing but charms. But they might not be that kind, after all," she faltered, resuming the seat she had occupied. "It's so easy these days for folks to be deceived, to deceive themselves and everything." He sat beside her and leaned a little forward. His face was inclined to paleness again. His eyes were intensely serious. "I think I have deceived myself for the final time, concerning some few things at least," he said, referring to his errors of judgment respecting Gaylord and her loan. "I hope today may render possible some final understandings." His earnestness a little disconcerted the happiness of spirit she had instantly conceived at his coming. She could only infer that he had come upon truths he found not altogether pleasant. "I have never wished to deceive you for a moment," she said. "I made up my mind to tell you everything, absolutely everything, today." It was Stuyvesant's turn to be surprised and puzzled. "Everything? You mean about your duties to Hertsegotha? Wait, please, before you answer. This may be perhaps our final little talk together, our last sunbright experience after the fates had seemed. I only wish to say that on the morning when we drove together through the snow, I spoke unguardedly. The stress of the moment, everything conspired to wring that declaration from my lips, and yet her heart was sinking. You didn't mean it." She tried to smile as the sunlight seemed about to vanish. "I have come here to confess and sue for pardon together," he told her, holding her gaze to his own with ties grown sacred and irresistible. "I love you, Princess, despite my utmost wish and sense of the hopeless plight into which I am plunged. I shall love you always, even though I have no right, even although you bid it cease, for its haunting echo in your after years. I would give my life to serve you. I would almost give it for this moment here, ours, all ours, so long as it may last. And if you find this quite beyond your pardon, nevertheless my love shall live, for none save God could make it die. And yet I hope for your pardon." She had closed her eyes and leaned a little back in the sweetness and marvellous ecstasy. She had no power at the moment to deny her heart, which had yearned and ached for his words. After a moment of silence and intensity, he added, "I'm not to be forgiven?" "Oh, don't say that," she begged him suddenly. "It is I who must beg forgiveness. But I came to tell you all, every little thing, that I am not a princess, that I am nothing in the world but just not a princess?" he interrupted suddenly, catching at her hand, which he held with a pressure that hurt and crushed, yet sent mad gladness to her heart. "Not Princess Thervinia, not—" "Oh, no, no, no," she cried, "but I never claimed I was. Alice never claimed it. We just let the rumour go. I don't know why we did it. We never realised what dreadful things might happen, what serious consequences." "Thurley, Thurley, thank God!" he broke in, wildly joyous, unspeakably relieved. "I have a right to love you then, to love you and love you and love you." She suddenly sprang to her feet to avoid the madness of his wooing. "But wait," she cried, "I've got to tell you all. I am no one, no one, no one in the world. I don't belong in your social sphere. I'm only what Alice has made me. Now you can take it all back if you like." She had never been braver, never more beautiful, honest, splendid in all her changeful career. She faced him frankly, her wonderful courage and candour shining in her eyes with a light of love she feared at that moment must be for ever hopeless. "Little heart," he said, his utterance singularly soft and charged with tenderness, "you are my little princess, my glorious little queen. You are what the gods have made you, my Thurley, the noblest, sweetest little woman in the world." She sank on the bench weakly, her eyes abruptly filled. "Oh, Robbie, don't say it, please," she begged, "if you ever want to take it back again." He sank on his knees, despite all sense of time and place, and kissed her hand. "Comrade," he said, "beloved." He drove the car when at last they knew they must return to her avenue home. They were alone at last in the room where so many emotions had run their course. She came to him simply, such a wealth of love overbrimming her eyes, that Robley's senses lifted away from all the things of earth. He held her passionately in his arms, while her own arms stole about his neck. Then they took and gave that wondrous kiss of glory. End of chapter 49.